30 years ago today, the greatest Marvel animated show. No, that's not quite right. The greatest superhero animated series. No, that's not quite right either. Oh, okay. Yeah, this is right. The greatest animated series of all time dropped with its first episode, Night of the Lizard. And that's right, we're talking about the 90s animated Spider-Man TV series, the greatest animated show of all time. I don't care what anyone says, that is the truth. Okay, well, everyone can have their own opinion. I mean, I know some people will say Batman or X-Men, but they're wrong. As far as I'm concerned, they're all wrong because it was Spider-Man from the 90s that was the pinnacle of superhero shows, and it's the best one that was ever made. So today, I'm going to talk about it, and I'm going to talk about my first experience with it and why it's the greatest. Or at least a little bit until we get into the rest of the ranking, which, yeah, I know that's been about 2 years since I started it, so I'll get to that at some point. But anyway, so happy anniversary, Spider-Man the Animated Series. This one is talking about how great you are. So if it wasn't perfectly clear or evident from my intro or any other Spider-Man videos I've done, anything I've done about this show, I love Spider-Man the Animated Series from the 90s. I think it's not only the best Spider-Man animated show, not the best Marvel show, I just think it's the best animated TV series ever. Now, of course, that's me being biased a little bit because Spider-Man is my favorite character of all time. And I don't really compare it to a live-action series. They're just not comparable or compatible as far as I'm concerned. Yes, I know they both rely on great storytelling, great characters, but I haven't really given thought to what live-action show is the best ever and comparing them. For me, that would be hard, really hard. Now, before I get further into this, I do want to say, I know some people are going to say, well, X-Men is the greatest because X-Men started it all. Yeah, I get it. X-Men, the animated series, launched this era of superhero shows, specifically Marvel. And yes, Batman, the animated series, helped launch this superhero comic book animated series thing in the 90s pretty much on its own, I would say. But they all started and established a formula, established a base, established what animated superhero shows could be. And Spider-Man just swung away with it, and in my opinion, perfected it. Now, I could get into all the details about every single voice actor or actress in the show. I could talk about every single episode. I could describe everything in details. But I'm going to say that for a different type of video. More of a ranking video, like I said earlier on. Which, yeah, it will come. I will get around to it. But in a nutshell, this show was just perfect to me. The animation was stunning. It was beautiful. The characters were so much fun. I loved every single one of the main cast. From Spidey and Peter Parker, to Aunt May, to Jameson, to Robbie, to every single one of his Rose Gallery, to all of the people associated with his life, Harry Osborn, MJ, Felicia Hardy, everything about these characters I loved. This was my true introduction into this world. Now, I will say, I do have one very tiny complaint. And I can't believe I'm about to say this, but part of me does kind of wish, knowing now what I do, that we had included Gwen Stacy a little bit more besides just putting her in the series finale. And, you know, maybe they could have done a little bit more with Betty Brant, or I think as they named her in this show, she was Betty Grant, and they changed some things up. But it all worked. Like I said, I really didn't have a true idea of who these characters were, how great they were, until I watched this show. Now, yeah, I'd read a couple comics prior. You know, I'd read some of my dad's old comics, which, like I've said before, I believe he will deny it. But if he didn't have the comic books, I would never have gotten into Spider-Man. So thank you, Dad. I appreciate it. But it really was this show that opened my eyes and opened up my mind to this world, to this Marvel universe. Like some people have said, it was X-Men that did it for them. For me, it was Spider-Man. And I think as a kid, I did realize that they were using the same animations, the same cells in some way. I mean, I didn't know the terminology, but I didn't care. I was more focused on the characters and the story. Now, granted, again, I wasn't as deep or philosophical or thinking about it the way that I might today, or the way I appreciate it like I do today. But I could not wait to sit down and watch this show every single day. I have so many fond memories of watching this show, of there being cliffhangers and me generally going, well, wait, but well, what's going to happen? But I can't wait. I want to see what happens. I can remember where the series stopped at points. I can remember the advertisements for this show. I mean, one of my favorite advertisements for it was the narrator going, so does anybody ever wondered what Spider-Man's webbing sticks to by him shooting it straight up into the sky? I mean, what's it sticking to anyway? I remember that so clearly because I didn't. But it was funny because then once he said that, I did kind of go, huh. I always just figured it was tall buildings. Because it was. It did look like in the animation that he was shooting his webbing straight up into the sky, connecting to something. Who knows? The shield helicarrier was carrying him around the whole time and he didn't realize it. But this show also, I felt like, really established an expanded universe for the animated series. Sure, we had extra characters in X-Men. You had brief cameo glimpses of characters. But here you had heroes interacting. You had references to other heroes. From the very first episode, like I mentioned in my review of that first episode, he mentions Avengers. He mentions Fantastic Four. He even mentions the Defenders, who I had no idea who they were at the time. I mean, there was so much about this show that was pure perfection. The voice cast was phenomenal. It was perfect. When I read a comic book, specifically a Spider-Man comic book, these are the voices I hear in my head. It's like what people say when they read a Batman comic book and they hear Kevin Conroy's voice as Batman or Mark Hamill's as the Joker, which it happens to me too. But these are the voices I hear. These are the designs that are the characters to me. They can change throughout all the comic book history and they may not ever look exactly like the animated show. But for me, if you were to say, okay, is Spider-Man 2 Doc Ock or is the animated series Doc Ock? I'm going animated series. I mean, you show me a comic panel of his first appearance versus the animated series. Oh, I know this one's the first one. I know this is the original. But it's this one. It was this show that made me fall in love with Venom. And I said once before when I was talking about Venom, this is my version of Venom. And, well, speaking of Venom, one of the things I remember so clearly about the show is when they introduced Carnage. I remember watching that first episode because I recorded it on my little tape, cassette recorder. I hit play as the episode played so that I could listen to it whenever I wanted to. Well, that episode was to be continued. And then they didn't show that episode. I just remember that so clearly because I was so upset that I didn't get to see how it ended and that I couldn't record the second part. It was a show that I loved so much. And like I said, it introduced me to all these other characters that were out there. It showed me and taught me things about Spider-Man that, oh, sure, fans had known for years. Not me. The Green Goblin episode, the very first Green Goblin episode. I felt for sure it was Harry Osborn. I had no idea that it was probably Norman. And, I mean, like, I didn't know who Gwen Stacy was either. I might have had some idea because I think she did appear in some of the comics I had. But Felicia was that character to me. I feel like they took Gwen Stacy and melded her with Felicia Hardy. Those two comic book characters became the one. And yeah, they weren't bad looking either. I know that's weird to say, but just as a kid watching this show and just loving the characters and admiring things, I was like, yeah, go Spidey. She's hot. Go get him. I mean, you have to understand, I was 10 when I watched this show. Now, that's to say, I didn't watch the show when it premiered. And apparently, going back and thinking about it and doing a little bit of research, apparently I was behind the curve. Because this show aired when I was 6. Yeah, I think that's what I figured out. The show aired when I was 6. And I wasn't quite into Spider-Man yet. I wasn't into Marvel stuff. I mean, I can't put a specific date on any of this stuff. I only can kind of figure out what's going on because I remember what my first episode was. So, sure, I can't say, oh, I loved this show from the very beginning. What I can say is I loved this show from the moment I first watched it. Because that first episode was actually a very interesting episode to start on thinking about it. It was the end of season 2. It was the end of the neurogenic mutation saga, I think is what they called it, or agenda. Of course, now I can't remember specifically what they called it. But it was all about, it was the whole man-spider mutation stories, starting with the Sinister Six and ending with the Tablet of Time. And the very first episode I ever watched was the finale for that arc, where you have Vulture sucking the life energy out of Spider-Man because of the Tablet of Time, pulls the mask off, and he's an old man. It's a weird episode for it to be your first, definitely. Especially when you turn it on and say previously on Spider-Man, you're like, what? Oh, come on! I didn't want to previously. I wanted to start fresh, But just to start with this old man version of Peter Parker, that threw me for a loop. I do remember that confusing me. I'm being like, wait, what? What happened? What's going on? Because I hadn't seen anything leading up to it. So I didn't understand. I'm like, why is this guy old? Or why? I'm assuming it's Peter, but why is he old? And like, why is, okay, first off, who's this? Okay, what's that Scorpion's deal? Because the Scorpion was in this too, and tied back to his first episode. And I just remember being kind of confused, like, okay, it's Spider-Man. Let's keep watching. And, you know, just the whole story of him being old and talking to Aunt May. This episode only has MJ in it at the very end. Again, if I'd seen the episodes beforehand, I would have understood why she was there. But I remember then when he got his life force back, because that was one thing they did a lot in this show. When I think about it now, they couldn't do anything saying, oh, they're killing this person, or they're, like with Morbius, they couldn't suck blood, so it was plasma, and, you know, so the life energy was just, I mean, they did it with Carnage then later on. But the whole point is, I remember this episode so clearly, then finally getting to see Spider-Man with his mask slightly removed, enough that he could see his face to know that he was back. And then that moment where he's back, and I want to say that he said, I'm back, or surprise, because he said something smart, something snarky. And then he just went to town on these two. So for my first episode to be him fighting two villains who I had no idea at the time who they were, was great. I mean, that shows how powerful this series was and how good this series was. The fact that I didn't start from the beginning. I started from this random episode that was weird, that was strange. It was the end of a season. It was part 2 of a specific episode. But yet I still kept watching, and I still love this show so much. I love collecting the figures from it. I love going back and getting the old Toy Biz figures from it. I have one of the big play sets that me and my buddy Cleus put back together because I loved that thing as a kid. Thinking about this show just brings a smile to my face, if you can't tell. There's, again, I could go on and on about it. I mean, I've already gone for over 15 minutes. I don't know how long the ranking video will be with just this episode. Yeah, spoiler alert. If you can't figure out, this is going to be number 1. So when people say, oh, this is the definitive version for me, or when I heard when Spectacular Spider-Man was coming out and the creators were like, we wanted ours to be the definitive version, I'm like, no, nope, sorry, it's not. It's never going to be. 90s is the definitive. Though I understand why, if that was the first one you saw, that one was great. I won't deny, Spectacular Spider-Man was really good. And that's why I am so definitely in the group of people saying, this new show, this new Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man show, why? Give us Spider-Man 98. Give us a revival. Like I said, I'll check out the new one. But they better, I really, really hope after X-Men did so well that we get this show. Because that will be, if that happens, that'll just make my day. And that'll make my huge, not little, huge nerd heart beat with joy. That will be a fantastic day for me. At least as far as nerd stuff goes. So I will leave with this one thing that was just really funny that I realized a couple years ago. It actually wasn't that long ago. It wasn't like 10 years ago. This was probably at least 3 years ago, maybe. 3 years ago I realized it. Peter Parker, the voice of Spider-Man and Peter Parker in this show, the one that I know, the one that I love, the one that is as definitive for me as Kevin Conroy is as Batman, was also Prince Eric in The Little Mermaid. the voice for the animated Little Mermaid. Okay, see, I gave you a moment. You thought about that. It's the same. And it's hard to believe. So, with that being said, what are your thoughts on this show? It's been 30 years. It's still popular. It's still the pinnacle, as far as I'm concerned, for Spider-Man animated. And it's the pinnacle for, I think, a lot of Spider-Man fans, especially those of us that grew up in the 90s. But what did you think about this show? What fond memories do you have of it? Have you not seen it? If not, what are you doing? Stop this. Go watch it. It's right now. It's on Disney+. If this isn't your favorite Spider-Man show, okay, I can respect that. But I still would say you're wrong. But explain to me why your favorite is what it is. Let's have a civilized conversation. Whatever your thoughts, comment down below. Don't forget to hit that like button. And remember, read what you love, enjoy what you love, and enjoy the Spider-Man version you love, whatever that may be. And let's all work for a better fandom. I'll see you next time. Spider-1, Spider-1, radioactive spider bullet, Spider-1, Spider-1, Spider-Man.